All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to give a little time here to let people come in, and then I will start speaking and talking about today's topic, which is dispensary and practitioner relationships and what you need to know. So let's just give it a moment. Hopefully, you all can hear me. Okay, great. All right, I'm going to get started here. My name is Dr. Matthew Roman. I am a physician, and I'm also the owner of Nature's Way Medicine, which is a medical marijuana clinic here in Pennsylvania. I'm assuming most of you who are watching are from Pennsylvania. And I just want to start off talking a little bit about my history and how I got here. So I started as a medical cannabis specialist in 2015. And excuse me one second. And I started my practice in Delaware, actually, because at that time in 2015, uh, Pennsylvania hadn't legalized yet. But I'm originally from Philadelphia. And so when Pennsylvania legalized cannabis, I quickly moved over to Pennsylvania and opened up a second branch of my practice here in Philadelphia, actually, where I'm based. But when I first started in Delaware, it was a very different situation than it is currently here in Pennsylvania. For one, there was only one dispensary in that entire state. Now, I know Delaware is not a large state, it's very small. You could drive through it in probably 2 hours. But still, for only one dispensary to exist makes it literally a monopoly, and it was a very different situation. So when I first started my practice, I was very gun ho about helping patients get their marijuana cards and get treatment with cannabis. And I viewed this a lot like how I would help patients with any other condition. Really, if somebody has high blood pressure, they need some high blood pressure meds. In this case, people who had chronic pain or PTSD, they needed cannabis. And I felt that cannabis was truly a remarkable medication. So I wanted to establish a relationship with the dispensary so that we could both provide patients with the best care possible. Now, another problem back then that we were having as an industry was not only that there was only one dispensary, but that led to a very mismatched supply and demand situation where tons of patients needed to get their cannabis and only one dispensary could provide it. So, in a perfect world, I wanted my patients to have the right strains and the right types of products for their cannabis treatment. And unfortunately, that was not possible. In fact, very frequently there would be a flower shortage, and the dispensary was unable to provide the patients the medications that were needed. I remember one time I literally wrote on a prescription pad for a patient. I wrote their name, their date of birth, my medical license number, and I wrote 1/4 OG Kush 2 times a day, 1 month supply, and I signed it and I told the patient, bring this script. It was literally a prescription the way that you would take to a pharmacy. They took that to the dispensary, and I really felt like I was doing a great job. Of course, what ended up happening was that the patient called me and said, well, not only do they not have OG Kush, but they said they don't work this way. So anyway, since that time, the times have really changed, and now my practice is primarily in Pennsylvania, where we have almost a dispensary on every corner, especially in Philadelphia. I think there's 6 different companies now with dispensaries, and there's no longer a flower shortage the way there was in the first year or two of the industry. Now there are all sorts of products. Unfortunately, we still don't have edibles, but we will get them hopefully one day. And anyway, we have RSO and other oral products like tinctures. So there's a lot better of a opportunity for patients to get the health care that they need. So why is this important for the industry, and how does this, ultimately come down to the dispensaries? Well, physicians don't prescribe cannabis medication, the way that I was trying to do in my early days as a cannabis specialist. These days, and really from the beginning, physicians can only recommend marijuana. And as you all know, most of the recommending when it comes to forms and types actually comes from the dispensaries, the bud tenders. But it is important to have good relationships between the dispensaries and the practitioners. And there's a number of reasons for this. So I'm going to open up my presentation now and share my screen. One second. Where is this? Bear with me here. Okay. I hope you all can see this. Great. So how or why is it important for good relationships between dispensaries and practitioners? Well, there are 2 main reasons, actually. The most important one, in my opinion, is patient care. We need to make sure that the patients are getting the right cannabis products that they need. And we need to do that by making sure they can get the right forms, and that they also are able to get the medication quickly. But for the dispensaries, there are also financial gains. Let's be real here. We all want patients to get the best care they want, but dispensaries are businesses, and they also want to make profits. And we're not recreational yet, so we're all trying to pretend in many ways that this is a purely medical industry. But let's face it, a lot of these patients also are using this loosely, not only just for treating their stubbed toes and chronic back pains, but sometimes for perhaps unqualified conditions like stress relief, which anyway falls into the category of anxiety relief for most people. So in any case, the dispensaries are trying to make money, and having a good relationship with a medical clinic that's providing these patients their marijuana cards can be helpful for financial gains to the dispensaries too. Particularly, it provides a smoother process for their patients to get their cards. They can sell more products to those patients, and there can be less times between the renewals. Let's talk a little bit about how the Pennsylvania and in many other states, which are very similar to this, how the laws can hinder or promote perhaps relationships between doctors and dispensaries. So the main things here in the Pennsylvania Act 16 that are particularly important for this subject are the following sections. There's one on practitioners, which says that a practitioner may not hold a direct or economic interest in a medical marijuana organization. So doctors, they can't, I guess, buy stocks in Cresco or maybe some of these other dispensaries and growers that have stocks. And I think a lot of doctors don't think about that, but they're not supposed to be doing that. And doctors cannot advertise their services as a practitioner who can certify a patient to receive medical marijuana. Now, that I don't understand how that's enforced, actually. But anyway, that's for another talk. when it comes to the dispensaries are not allowed to have a physician who can uh, certify patients to receive marijuana or otherwise treat patients in from the dispensary. So if a dispensary is employing a physician, which few of them do because physicians are very costly, they expect to be paid a lot of money, and most of the dispensaries, as you all know, have pharmacists instead doing the work that they need. But in any case, if a dispensary is hiring a physician, that physician is not allowed to certify patients for marijuana cards. So that brings up a situation where there can be some problems for the dispensaries because the dispensaries can't have their own doctor just certifying people and then saying, okay, once you get your card, come on back here and buy our products. They have to rely on the community's practitioners. And as many of us know, doctors don't learn about cannabis in medical school. Most of us don't know diddly squat about cannabis. Some of us have experimented with marijuana. I, for example, have been a medical marijuana patient, so I know completely all about it. But most doctors don't know anything about it. They're very straight edge, and they're not familiar with marijuana. And so they can have varied requirements and strict rules on approving patients. And if a dispensary tells a patient, hey, go see this doctor that is in the neighborhood, or perhaps if a patient goes to that doctor without a dispensary's recommendation to go see that doctor, they may have a hard time getting a marijuana card, even if they are qualified for marijuana. And as I was saying earlier, it's ultimately the bud tenders who make the true recommendations to the patients. The doctor can tell a patient, well, go get some OG Kush or some White Widow or whatever is on the menu, but by the time the patient gets there, that may not be available anymore. And most of the time, the doctors aren't doing that either because they don't know the difference between different strains. They may know a little bit about indicas and sativas, but in any case, it would be very good for a dispensary to have a doctor who can approve patients, particularly one who can diagnose them with the qualified conditions easily. So we got to put it out there right away. Physicians should decline some patients for marijuana. This is a medical marijuana state, and a physician who's approving every patient for marijuana is not doing their job well, because there are plenty of patients that are trying to get recreational marijuana. They may be falsifying their conditions, pretending that they have certain diseases that they don't. And some of them may be attempting to divert marijuana. They want to just get the card so they can buy it for their friends. And there are situations that arise like that. So if a doctor's approving patients like that, then they will get in trouble. And it's important for a dispensary not to be associated with a physician's office that's approving patients too easily, because then that physician's office may not be running for much longer. I know from firsthand experience that the Department of Health is doing investigations on physicians rather frequently and making sure that these doctors are doing their jobs right and not over recommending patients marijuana. I remember when I first started here in Pennsylvania, there was a investigator that just showed up at the clinic and had a discussion with me, and he said, what if I told you that you recommended that you have certified 6,000 patients for marijuana cards? And I said, well, I haven't been keeping track, so I guess I'm pretty happy with that number. And he said, what if I told you the next most common, the next highest doctor has only approved 89 patients for marijuana cards? And I said, well, I'm actually surprised, because they're all pretending like they're certifying patients left and right. I was very shocked by that stat. But anyway, that's for another time here. So anyway, the reason I never got in trouble for over certifying patients is because I had plenty of documentation of how many patients I was declining for marijuana cards. patients would be leaving me poor reviews online simply because of denying them cards, but I was not about to be approving patients without the right documents or without qualified conditions, especially if there was any sense of diversion that might be going on. But anyway, having said that, it's important to get patients marijuana cards often for conditions and to keep the bar low. We all know no one has died from marijuana before. There's almost zero long-term side effects from marijuana, and it's certainly a better alternative to most of the other pharmaceuticals that physicians are prescribing. So we should keep the bar low, and dispensaries should have doctors close by that they can recommend patients to, knowing that these doctors are going to keep that bar low, but with appropriate conditions, and strict requirements. But you don't want to deny someone chronic back pain necessarily just because they haven't seen a doctor in a few years, when clearly the person is in pain and subjectively is suffering, especially if they're already using cannabis on the side and it's helping them. We don't want them using it on the street, from the street, because these days vape cartridges can be actually laced with fentanyl, and I've heard this happening to a number of patients, and that's extremely unsafe. They can overdose from that. So anyway, you want to be associated with doctors who are familiar diagnosing patients easily. Here I'm showing you what a doctor has to go through in order to certify a patient online for a marijuana card. How am I on time, by the way? I should probably hurry up here. So doctors allow certain forms. You want to have a doctor that you can recommend patients to that will certify patients and allow them for all the different forms. There's nothing worse than having a patient come into the dispensary who's only allowed to use oral products and isn't allowed to buy any of the wonderful vape cartridges, concentrates that they can vaporize that are on the market. Generally speaking, patients, in my opinion, should be allowed different forms, not just topicals, for example. And so you want to familiarize yourself with a physician's practice that will always approve patients for all the different forms of cannabis. Also, telemedicine has been allowed in Pennsylvania, and this makes it a lot easier for patients to get their cards anywhere in the state with the right doctor's office. So if you're a dispensary, let's say in Pittsburgh, you can recommend patients to do their telemedicine appointments with a clinic in Philadelphia or Harrisburg or somewhere else in the state that you have a familiar relationship with. Hopefully this continues because it really allows patients an easier time to get their marijuana cards. There are multi-state operators that have come in and taken advantage of this in Pennsylvania, and they generally charge more for what they're doing for approving the patients. Personally, I think the quality of their approving is not the best. It seems like they are just approving almost anyone, and I think that they may end up getting in trouble knowing how strict that the state is about the doctors and how they provide their services. So it could be risky in the long run. There are tons of local practices all over the place that are now approving patients, and generally I recommend that dispensaries have a relationship with a local practice to support local businesses as well. And that allows patients who don't want to do telemedicine to quickly come in person to a local or a local clinic, and then they don't have far to go, so that this way a dispensary can provide their local population a quick access clinic that they can get their cards from. They tend to be cheaper and more cost effective as well. And you want to have a relationship with a doctor's office that's going to send patients back to you. So the most common question that we get asked at our clinic, and we see tons of patients, is which dispensary should I go to? It's not what forms of marijuana should I be using, what strains should I try? It's what dispensary do I go to? So if a dispensary is, for example, sending us patients, let's say it's from Harvest, for example, or Restore, And we ask patients on each form, whether it's telemedicine or not, we ask them to fill in their forms which dispensary has sent you, how did you hear about us? And when we see that they've been sent from a dispensary, we generally tell them, go back to the dispensary that sent you to us. That dispensary has the following products. We know them well. They've been around for so and so long. Try them first, and if they don't have the products that you like, try a different one. And so this way, dispensaries who send at least us patients are not going to lose those patients to other dispensaries, because there's so many dispensaries to choose from these days. I'm not saying send your patients to us. In fact, don't send your patients to Nature's Way Medicine. Try to find other doctors that will do the same thing. I mean, we are available, but that's not what the talk is for. What the talk is for is for you to understand, as dispensary owners, how important it is to help patients find the right doctors. There could be certification events that you host with the right doctors, particularly ones that will do it for low prices. So, for example, when we have certification events with dispensaries, we only do it we charge patients $50. That's it. This way, the patients can spend more money at the dispensaries. Now, there are plenty of other doctors, clinics that are doing certification events with a variety of different dispensaries and perhaps growers as well. And try to find the right ones. And the way that this will affect your profits is that, well, for one, there'll be less time between renewals, because the doctor's office that you choose can be quick at approving patients. They don't take a long time. Sometimes doctors take weeks to approve a patient after they've seen them. You definitely don't want to refer patients to that kind of a clinic, because that's just a lapse of healthcare right there. You want to send patients to doctors that charge less as well. That way the patients will spend more at your dispensary instead of spending more for the $50 renewal fees that they got to pay to the state, plus the doctor's office visits. And you also want to, by the way, send to doctors that don't require close follow-ups. So there are plenty of doctors in the state that require 3-month follow-ups. That cost the patient money every 3 months that could be going to the dispensary, and in my opinion is actually not appropriate, because most of the time these doctors have a reason to be following up so much, and they're just basing it off of oxycodone follow-ups that are required every month, and they don't usually know what to tell the patient to change their care for any improvement in the treatment anyhow. So anyway, my point of this talk is that if you have a close relationship with a clinic that can approve your patients rapidly in the right way, approve them for all the different forms, not spend too much money, and send them back to your dispensary, you're going to end up making a lot more money that way in the long run from purchases from these patients. So I'm going to now open this up to questions from the audience, and I'm glad you are all here to listen. Let me turn off my screen sharing. It's just me now. And I guess I'll go to Q&A. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to write them. And I hope you all enjoyed this talk. Hope it wasn't too short. By the way, also I should mention, check out the reviews of the doctor that, as dispensaries, you're sending your patients to. You can learn a lot from the reviews, whether you go by lowest first or just by the rating of the clinic, also by the amount of reviews. You'll get a better understanding of if you should be sending your patients to these clinics or not. I don't see too many questions here, so I guess I could talk about something else, or perhaps we could end this early. I see some people are leaving now, and there are other sessions in place. So really, I thank you all for the time that you spent here. Feel free to contact me. I'll put my my email in the discussion section and I look forward to hearing from anybody. Thank you very much, and you all take care. Bye bye.